If you are dreaming of living abroad, but you think maybe you're too old or it's too late for you, and somehow you're just not going to be able to make that happen, and you're worried that maybe your dream is going to pass you by, I'm telling you, you do not have to think that. You're going to want to stay tuned and listen to this. I'm Jerry. I'm an American single expat, and I've been living in Paris, France for over a decade. And I didn't even move here until I was 44 years old. Today, I'm going to talk about how I manifested my dream life of moving to and living in Paris, France. So I've lived here for over a decade. And over the years, I've gotten a lot of people who have asked me, how did you do it? How did you get there? And there are a lot of steps to take, to be honest with you. But that's actually not going to be what I'm going to get into today because that is extensive. And, if you're interested in that, just let me know. But today, I'm going to talk about something that I think is really, really more important, which is how do you start? Because moving abroad, it was a lot more loaded than simply moving. I had moved before. I didn't really think about it at the time. But yeah, there were a lot of steps actually that I took to make this happen that I didn't even know that I was taking. Moving from LA to Paris wasn't like a normal move. This wasn't just about finding a new place to live. This was about achieving a dream. And that required me to get into a different headspace in order to make something happen. Like I said, there are a lot of things that you have to do that are different when you're moving to a different country than it would be when you're moving in your home country. And those things can be difficult and they can be, you don't know how you're going to get them done. So they can be kind of confusing, but they can also be fairly easy. And that's where the manifesting comes in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the three things that I did, the three steps that I took in order to make this a reality. So the first step is to dream. Now, I dreamt quite a bit about Paris and about France, but here's the thing. For me, I didn't even know that I was dreaming. I had always been fascinated with Paris and with France. And I didn't know this, even when I was a little kid. I grew up in Los Angeles and I had never been to Europe. I didn't travel to Europe. My parents didn't take me on vacations to Europe. We just didn't grow up in that kind of a family. And so I didn't know anything about France really when I was little. But there were a few things, especially now as I look back, that were very indicative of the fact that there was this sort of calling for me to go to France. So, one of them is that when I was little, we used to go on vacations. My mother was 100% Native American Indian, and we used to go to New Mexico, where she grew up, every summer. And one of the things that we did is we would stop in Santa Fe, and there was this hotel back then. This is, my gosh, back in the 70s. I was born in 1967. So this is back in the 70s. I'm 57 now. It's 2024. So sometime when I was in single digits back at this, going to the Santa Fe on the way back to the reservation with my mom, and what we would stay at this hotel in Santa Fe, which is no longer called the same hotel. The hotel structure is actually still there, but the hotel was called the De Vargas Hotel. And there was this man, this manager, I think he was a manager who worked there, and he had this little black dog. It was a poodle, and this poodle used to stand on the counter, like the check-in counter. And he would speak to this poodle in French. So this man was, well, maybe he was Canadian, but or maybe he was from another French-speaking country, but I believe he was French. And he used to speak to his poodle in French, and the poodle was very, very well behaved. Look, I have two dogs now. They are not nearly as well behaved as that poodle. But that always stuck with me, and I was so fascinated by the language by the French language. And it's not like I didn't hear other languages. I mean, I grew up in a household where, with two parents who spoke other languages. My mother spoke her native tongue growing up, and obviously we spoke English at home. And my father was Japanese American, and my grandmother came straight from Japan and spoke Japanese. So I, had heard other languages before, but there was something about French that just intrigued me. And I didn't even know it at the time, but I always thought about that. I forgot about this whole exchange for a long time until probably after I moved here that I realized that, wow, I was so intrigued by that man and his French dog, his French conversing with his dog. So that was one indication that France was sort of on my radar. Also, by the time I had moved here, and I had studied French when I was an undergrad, and I was very intrigued with French things along the way. Of course, I dated some French guys, and that's a whole other conversation. We won't go there right now. But when I was younger, certainly did that. And was very, I used to speak French. I used to, when I was waitressing, when I was an undergrad, I worked with several French people, and I used to try to speak French. I was learning. I think I was only in my first or second year and barely spoke French. And I was so embarrassed. I was so embarrassed to speak French because I didn't know it, and I didn't, my accent, didn't know how to do the accent right. I still don't, by the way. Um, and it's so funny because they used to all say like, "Oh, speak French. It's so cute." And, and this is, what it was like for me being in my, early 20s. Um, I was embarrassed, and I just didn't believe that they thought it was cute. I've since learned that, yes, they often do think that American accents are cute when when you're speaking French. So the French, that is. So anyway, I had this, fascination with the language, and I met French people, and I really enjoyed it. And I still hadn't been to France at that time. And then by the time I was ready to move here, actually, a friend of mine had gone into my apartment and said, "Wow, um, you have a lot of French stuff around you." And I had never really realized it, that I had collected a lot of things that were very French. And what she said, and I still didn't get it at this time, she said, "You really called that into you, didn't you? You really manifested a life in Paris." Because this is when I was packing up my place to move to France. If you're enjoying this video, please click like or subscribe. And when she said that, I looked around and I thought, wow, she's right. I had, oh my gosh, I had this big wall that was just empty, and it was kind of behind on the side of like my refrigerator, and I didn't know what to put there. And so what I did, and I don't know, some of you might remember this, IKEA used to have this big, gigantic photograph that you could hang on the wall, and it was of the Eiffel Tower. And I thought that the only reason that I was buying it, aside from the fact that like I liked France and, of course, but I thought that I was buying it because it was the only thing that I could find that was really inexpensive that would take up a lot of wall space. And because it wouldn't, I wanted something that was going to cover that wall. So that's what I thought. So I had this big picture of the Eiffel Tower kind of tucked away on the side of the refrigerator. It wasn't even supposed to be prominent. It was sort of supposed to be background. I also had these curtains in my kitchen that had French writing on them, like that French script. And I had several other sort of little French kind of knick-knacky things. And I believe in my hallway, I also had some runners that I think had French script on them too. And these were not anything intricate. They were just And I didn't even really notice the fact that they were so French. It was just that when I saw them, I liked them and I got them and I put them in my apartment. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I truly believe that that was part of my getting here, that I surrounded myself with things that were really French. And as my friend said, I really do think that I called my Paris experience into me. I think that I called it in, and because I was keeping it in my orbit, I had this very French energy around me. And it it really reminded me, it almost sort of put me in France in my mentality until my reality actually caught up with it. Let me see, what else did I do? Um, I want to make it clear. I did not realize I was doing this at the time. So it's great if you do, that's wonderful. But if the reason I'm saying this is if you know that maybe you want to move somewhere, or maybe you have a dream of living abroad, but you just don't know where. I'm going to say that maybe inside, you know where. I suspect you inside, you know where. And that maybe it's coming out in the things that are already around you. You may just not have taken notice of it. That's what happened with me. I was surrounded by French things, and then without even realizing that that was, that was what I was dreaming of. So, okay. So the second thing is to listen. Now, when I say this, what I mean is that you need to give yourself the space to listen to what your body and your heart are telling you. So, here I was surrounded by all of this French stuff and not really knowing that I had this dream still to move to France. So one day when I was living in Los Angeles, I decided that I needed to move. I was living in a place where I just wasn't happy anymore. And I thought, okay, it's time for me to move. And then I thought, where? I knew that I didn't want to live in the neighborhood that I was currently living in. I mean, I liked it enough, but I felt like I was sort of done there. And I thought about all of the different places in Los Angeles. Now, remember, I'm an LA native, so that's how sometimes LA natives are. We just think that that's the only place that we would ever want to live. And I'm not knocking it, because LA will always be my home, and I love Los Angeles, and it is a wonderful place. But just for me, in terms of the universe and in terms of my life and my growth and my spiritually speaking, that's not where I was supposed to be for the rest of my life, at least not at that time. So at the time, I didn't know this, and I was thinking, where would I move? So I was thinking about all of these different parts of Los Angeles that I would want to move to. And I couldn't think really of anywhere that I would want to move in Los Angeles. So I started expanding a little bit more and thought, okay, what about in Southern California? And nothing seemed to even be remotely interesting. And I thought of different places in the United States. And I might entertain a place for a little while. And I was actually really thinking about this hard. I was really thinking, okay, how could I make it work? Okay. I had spent some time, months at a time in New York, and I thought, would I want to move there? And I wanted to want to move there, but the fact is that I kept thinking, like, how would I make that work? And how could and I would try to imagine myself there, and it just didn't feel right. And I thought about and New York's an amazing city, obviously. Love New York, great city. And then I thought about some other large cities, and I just did not get that feeling that it was going to work. And it was and I spent quite a while trying to do this. So I spent quite a while, meaning probably weeks, entertaining the idea, because I wasn't in a rush to move. I just knew that I wanted to move. And, I was just trying to figure it out and wait till something happened. And I figured at that time in my life that the more I thought about it, the greater the chances would be that I would figure things out. And I've since realized that is not how it gets done. By thinking something to death, that's not how one comes up with the right answer. But at that time in my life, that's what I was doing. So I was thinking, trying to figure out how it was that I could make these other cities work. And it just, nothing was coming in. And I was getting frustrated. And so at one point, and this is important, I slowed down and I asked myself, okay, you know what? If I could move anywhere, let's just take out all the parameters. If I could move anywhere, like on the planet, where would that be? And immediately, I felt this answer: Paris. And it wasn't like Paris with a question mark. It wasn't like Paris. It was a definitive, like of course, you'd move to Paris. And when I felt that, I knew that that was where I wanted to move. I didn't know that that was where I was going to move. I knew that that was a place that I wanted to move. Now, I have to tell you, I know I just said that like I didn't realize that I had ever dreamed of moving to Paris, but there was one time I remember being in Paris in my 20s. And I was so enchanted. And it was the first time that I had been to Paris. And I was late, compared to all of my friends had already been to Paris and they had gone to Europe. And I was sort of late in the game. And I went and I had such an amazing time. I mean, I really just fell in love with the city. But you have to remember, I did not come from a place where I concretely thought of that as an option. That wasn't where my life was at that time. That wasn't what my headspace. I've since become that person, thank goodness. But at that time, that was not a possibility for me. I do remember thinking, if I was older and single, I would move to Paris. Now, I have to tell you, in my 20s, at that time, older was younger than I was when I moved here. At that time, I don't remember what it was. I thought like if I was older, like 40. Well, I didn't move here until I was 44. It was much past me being older. So at the time that the Paris thought fell into my head, or maybe resurfaced from my heart is more appropriate, I thought, well, I did at one point think that I was going to live here. And I always said that if I was older and single, I would live here. So I thought, well, I am in fact older than older was when I said that. And I am in fact single. Maybe I should try this. So if you feel like, I know I want to be somewhere and I just don't know where, I urge you to slow down and connect. And I have to tell you, I've since gotten into a nice meditation practice as I've gotten older. I mean, I'm 57 now. It's a little bit, I tried to meditate for many years and I've gotten much, much better at it now. But at that time, I didn't have a meditation practice. So this is not about like meditate on this for 30 minutes. In fact, that moment of slowing down was really like a fraction of a second. But what I did in that moment, and I think this is very important, is I let go of the parameters. That was what opened up my mind. When I said to myself, okay, wait a second, if I could live anywhere on this planet, like let's just stop saying it has to be this type of a place or this close to here or that. Like let's just pull out all the stops. If I could live anywhere, where would that be? That was when Paris fell into my mind. So when doing the listening part, this just means slowing down and be patient with yourself. Be patient, but just give yourself that space to maybe you ask yourself a question. If I could have anything, what would that be? And maybe that would be like if I could live anywhere or if I could do anything. Just take out the parameters and treat yourself like you're your best friend. Hey, if you could live anywhere, where would it be? Chill, easy. You don't have to grill yourself. Just make it easy. Okay, so the third step is to start taking action. Now, there are a lot of things that you're going to need to do in order to move to a foreign country. And I'm not going to go into that because that would be hours long, for me to do that. But I will say this, you're going to need to start taking some sort of action. So what I did, I actually sat with it probably for a little while. It scared me, to be honest with you. And here's the thing, I just needed something to be scarier than the thing that was scaring me. So moving to Paris sounded really scary, but I really wanted to do it. And what I instinctually did was I found the thing that was scarier than moving to Paris on the other side, which was letting go of my dream and never fulfilling that dream. I had made that statement to myself. I made a decision when I was in my 20s that I was going to live in Paris if I was in the situation that I was currently in. And I knew that if I didn't do that, it was going to be because I was afraid. And although I haven't always made, the best decisions, I really don't have any regrets. And I didn't have any regrets at that point either, because I've always done the best I could. I have a strong understanding that even when I've made decisions that didn't serve me or I let fear stop me, I was doing the best I could. But at that time, at 44 years old, I had already done enough work and learned how to walk through fear, how to do things that scared me. So I didn't know how to do that before. I didn't know how to do that when I was younger. That is a skill that I had to learn how to do. So now that I had known how to do that, I knew that if I didn't move to Paris, this would be the first time in my life that I was capable of walking through fear and let fear stop me by choice. The other times in my life that fear had stopped me were not by choice. I had no choice because I just didn't have the tools to walk through my fear. So the idea of knowing that I would have to live the rest of my life, knowing that I wanted to do this, I kind of made a decision to do it. And I was ready to take my dream, but I stopped because I was afraid. That scared me more than actually moving to Paris. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not a straight shot from there, but at that point I decided, okay, I'm going to start doing this, and I'm just going to do a little bit and just keep going. So that's basically what I did. Now, I have to tell you, there were several things along the way that were difficult to do, and I was worried that it wasn't going to work out. But I was also, in my heart, to be completely honest with you, I was kind of hoping that it wouldn't work out because I was scared. It was scary for me. I'm not one of those people who said like, I'm moving to Paris and it's going to be great and I'm not afraid of anything. That wasn't me. I wanted to do this, but I didn't know anyone in Paris. I barely, I didn't speak the language. I happened to know some French words and phrases. And it was just scary to me. I had never lived abroad. And, I had lived in the same town my whole life. I had lived in Los Angeles my whole life at 44, my entire life. So I was scared and I kept thinking, okay, if I just keep doing these things and something doesn't work out, like maybe this is going to be the thing that doesn't work out. And I'll be able to say like, oh, I always wanted to live in Paris. I really wanted to. And I worked really hard to make that dream come true. And I couldn't. And so, but I tried. This was my thing. I wanted to be able to say, look, I tried. I didn't want to have to say, I didn't even try. because for me, the biggest misstep would be to not even try. So I went ahead and said, okay, I'm going to start taking action. And I did. And one thing would happen, and I would cross that bridge, and then I would come to another one. And I have to tell you, and this is how I know that this was just meant to be in my life. Doors started flinging open. I had somebody say, when I was living in LA, who also lived in LA, oh, you know what? I have a friend who's looking to rent an apartment in Paris. Do you know of anyone? And I was like, yeah, me. So there were a lot of things like that happened. And I can tell you more about that journey later on another video. But I just wanted to give you this information, and hopefully it will inspire you to not necessarily move abroad if that's not your thing, because, living abroad isn't for everybody, but to do that thing that's inside of you, because I do know how scary that can be. But it is so possible to create a life that you want, to fulfill those dreams. So thank you so much for listening to this story. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them. If you like this video, please click like or subscribe. Okay, I will see you next time on Let's Do Paris. Okay? À la prochaine, mes amis.